Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Whether you're a major contractor doing a huge job or a do-it-yourselfer looking to start a home improvement project, the place to begin is A.G. Hines Company in downtown Knoxville. 101 years of proven quality with better materials than the big national chains. I promise you that. aghines.com to learn more. You see the phone number, and you can find them at Hines Street, appropriately enough, right in downtown Knoxville. A.G. Hines Company. All right, let's welcome in the two members of the panel who I don't trust. Got down there on the far end, Chuck Cavaleras, who's a longtime sports writer in this town, longtime member of the panel, which I can say the same thing for Bob Hodge, who sits right beside you. Guys, thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here.
Very simple segment. How big was that win for Rick Barnes? You lose, and it would have been 7 straight to Pearl. Would have been your only home loss of the year today. Would have been to Pearl. You would have been 4-8 overall. Last week I said 3-7. It was 4-7 going in. So my apologies. So you would have been 4-8 with a loss. Instead, you flipped the script. How big was that victory? We'll start at that end of the panel, and you guys just take it from here.
Well, I mean, Isaiah's already said, humongous, I believe. I mean, you got the monkey off your back of the Rick Barnes thing, the 6-game losing streak. It also locked up a double bye in the SEC tournament. And I'm moving, right down the list here. And I was like, I would put it in like a regular season context. Is it winning at Kentucky big? Sure seemed that way when you're down 11, come back up by 11. But here's one more thing, and you may get into some of this later. Yesterday was the first time in the top 10 in the country 7 of those teams lost. So you picked a pretty good time to put a big win on the board. So I thought for all the reasons you mentioned, it was one of the biggest wins Rick Barnes regular season ever.
Did you make or lose money on Thursday? The way I looked at it, it was big for a couple of reasons. One, since Rick Barnes has been here, part of the criticism has been February has not been a good month in general for his teams. So you're going to end, barring an upset this week at Georgia or losing next week, you're going to end on that high note. And the fact that Pearl came in here, he took Tennessee to number 1 for the first time in school history. He took Auburn to number 1 for the first time in school history. You're still rated number 3 in the country. So all of that stuff combined with the fact that this keeps your momentum going into the spring makes it huge. And then when you get back to, you got sports writers here in town still writing. How much do people still love Bruce Pearl? How many times does that happen with a former coach that is still
left you on probation?
Yeah, that is that far in the rearview mirror. So the fact that that's still part of what the media is talking about, I think humongous, using Isaiah's word, is a very good word.
For me, I think it was big, obviously, for all the things y'all mentioned. I don't think Barnes really gives a rip.
No.
I think he don't even hear it. I do think from the standpoint of, the records and that type of stuff, but also from a recruiting and a player, because fans do talk about it. We have done a really good job of recruiting the state. This state is getting more and more talent. When you look at the recruiting rankings, there's a lot of talented high school players in here. And that Bruce Pearl shadow and the chirping of that is something that's out there that recruits here and your current roster here. And so the fact that they won and they beat BP and Auburn is meaningful in a lot of ways. Not to Barnes, not for him, but in those other areas that you mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think Coach Barnes cares a lot about what the media is saying or who everyone loves the most, but I think he does care about the 6-game win streak. So anybody that's ever beat me, I can probably remember back to grade school. So I'm thinking his competitive nature is somewhere similar, and I'm thinking he wanted to end that. So I think that was the most important thing. And then after the wins, they start liking you more and all that. But he probably doesn't care much about that, but the wins and losses, he certainly does.
I would just say this, that if he kept losing to Bruce Pearl, that's how seats get warm. That's how seats get hot. So I don't think he's sitting there thinking, I want to beat this because the media is saying this, or because there's a portion of the fan base, 11.6% or 23% that still loves Bruce. But I do think it was a huge win. Take him out of it. It was a huge win for him on his behalf, because if you keep losing to Bruce Pearl, you said, was that as big as Kentucky? I'm of the opinion from the people I talked to,
Bigger?
Your new rival right now is Auburn and Bruce Pearl, not Kentucky. I think that's your biggest rival.
But keep in mind also, they were top 5 in the country, right? So
Another
we
huge
forget
plus.
that we forget that they're a really good basketball team. You mentioned 7 of the top 10 teams in the country lost yesterday. And so sometimes as fans, we talked about earlier in the season, we only focus in on our team or that one game. Yeah. Auburn was a really good team, and if you end up losing to them, it wouldn't have been the end of the world because they're a top 5 team in the country.
If you're rational.
But if you lose, if you lose to Auburn and Auburn continues to be a top 10 team in the country, yes, there's a different type of temperature on Barnes' seat because Pearl was here. But fans shouldn't take it that extreme to where if you can't beat Bruce Pearl, but you're still finishing in the top 3 of arguably the hardest league in the country, that Barnes should all of a sudden be on the hot seat. That's irrational.
Do you disagree with me? If he'd lost 8, 9 straight to Bruce Pearl, there wouldn't be people calling for his head?
If he can
disagree with me?
Disagree. If he continues, there'll be people. No, there'll be
I'm
people
100%
that
right on that.
There will be people that want his head, but those people are irrational. Because if you're finishing top 3 in the SEC, but you're losing to a team that's top 10 in the country, like who are you going to get?
But here's the thing: you're thinking rationally. The word "fan" is for fanatic, and that's any fan base anywhere. I was just what you run into is a group that. Well, I had somebody this year, we were talking about Josh Heupel did a great job, blah, blah, blah. I got an email from a guy who's like, yeah, you guys have bought in. Tell me when he beats Florida or Georgia or Alabama. That's what you're talking about. Florida, Georgia, Alabama. Those are great teams. There's no shame in losing to them. People are sick of losing. Congratulations. You beat Ole Miss. You beat Missouri, whoever. When are you going to beat Georgia? That's the way it works. You know that. I mean, I think it was a huge win. I'll be the guy that says it was monster.
And on top of everything else, doesn't it keep you in the hunt for a regular season title? Don't you still have a shot at that? I mean, you go beat Georgia, then take care of Arkansas. Who knows?
Bob?
It made me think of the Ole Miss football game. Now, I was at the Ole Miss football game, so I was a part of it and the atmosphere. So sitting at home, you don't quite get it. But that atmosphere yesterday reminded me of the Ole Miss football game. And when you lose in that kind of atmosphere, then it always ups the ante a little bit. It makes the loss seem a little bit worse. And I'll also say, gauge the reaction to this win versus the reaction to the Arizona win, which Arizona is everything that Auburn was. Now, earlier in the season, not SEC play, but I just think Bruce Pearl on that sideline makes this a much bigger deal than if it was Coach X.
Yeah,
and the same team, the same school, the same caliber of play.
100%. But if you lose to top 10 teams, it shouldn't all of a sudden be a call for their head if you're continuing to finish in the top of the SEC.
Well, just to be clear, I'm not calling for his head. I'm telling you what you would have gotten if he'd have continued to lose year after year to Bruce Pearl. And I think you've already got people around here that like Pearl more than they do Barnes. Maybe a small group, but they're out there. So I'm surprised that, well, Bob agreed. I'm surprised that I'm the guy saying it's a huge win. And it's not as big a win as I think. I disagree. I think it's your biggest win of the year, by far. I think it's huge. You get the monkey off
Humongous.
I think so, too.
Humongous. All right. When we come back, what is Tennessee's level as a program right now? Do we trust this team? And what about dancing on mid-court logos? We'll talk about all that. Come on back on the Sports Source.